Straight up, I found a new appreciation for Dragon Age 2. First time I ever played this in 2011, it was hard not to compare this to Dragon Age Origins. The biggest thing holding it back for me was that the entire game was confined to a single city, well, and the mountains surrounding it.
Yes, always the same story.
But straight after replaying Origins and returning to this a whole 15 years later, I found a whole new love for this. I love how faithful it feels to the original Dragon Age. Maybe it's nostalgia talking, but every time a returning character appeared or got a mention, it genuinely made me smile.
Ooh, enchantment!
And as Nathaniel, Liliana, Zevran, every familiar face was giving me a little buzz, like the game was rewarding me for being invested in this world. It does a fantastic job of reinforcing the sense of continuity between the games.
Exactly.
And perhaps most importantly, this still feels like Dragon Age. I'd forgotten just how dark, visceral, and over the top it can be at times.
Holy shit.
So the game begins, and the entire story is told through one of Varric's tales. He's being interrogated after the supposedly crazy events of Dragon Age 2. Varric is a new character here. He's basically maxed out his charisma stat, a natural storyteller, wields a crossbow named Bianca, and might just be my favourite dwarf of all time.
I'm the handsome, irresistibly charming one.
You already get the sense that he might be a bit of an unreliable narrator. He might spin the story of Dragon Age to hide something or protect someone, and that's something he quickly gets called out for.
Bullshit. That's not what really happened.
15 years wiser, I've got a different perspective. I think this is a really cool idea. Some of my absolute favourite game stories involve unreliable narrators. It elevates the storytelling, leaving you constantly wondering what Varric has hidden or what parts of the story you might have lied about.
Twist my tail.
And going in, you can import your save from the original Dragon Age, carrying over all your decisions and choices, from who's dead or alive to who's the King of Ferelden.
Right, I'm Alistair. King of Ferelden.
I love this. I love that my previous actions in the previous game are carried over like this. It feels like my own personal Dragon Age story unfolding across the series. And whenever I see one of my past decisions reflected in this game, it hits on a really satisfying personal level. I wish more games did this kind of thing.
I agree.
Before we really get into it, quick pause. If you love RPGs, consider subscribing to Bytes or giving the video a like. I'm a bit of an indie game developer who covers RPGs, and I'm replaying the whole Final Fantasy series while ranking them. Thank you.
We're done then. Let's get back to Kirkwall.
So this time, you can play as a warrior, rogue, or mage. You've got to be human, but you can choose your gender. Now, there are definitely fewer RPG options this time around. In the previous game, you could play as different races with unique backgrounds, and there were 6 distinct origin stories depending on what you picked. Throughout Dragon Age 2, compared to the original, there are things it does better and things it does worse. Trade-offs we'll get into as we go. Simple.
It's just that simple.
This time I went with a mage, but Dragon Age 2 starts around the same time period as the original game, with your family of the Hawks on the run from the Darkspawn. Interestingly, either your brother or sister dies depending on the class you pick at the start, and the other becomes one of your main party members for the main game. I really like the opening section with the Darkspawn. You even bump into Flemeth the Witch, who swoops in to save you. And I love moments like this because in the original game, I straight up murdered her, but this is before any of that, and it's already planting new seeds for what comes later.
Well, what have we here?
We're getting callbacks to my favourite optional questline from the original game almost immediately. Sick as hell. Little Dragon Age lore moments like this go a long way.
I may be able to help you yet.
We managed to make it to the refuge at the city of Kirkwall, which gives off this really intimidating, oppressive vibe with these towering golden statues of slaves. The slavers are gone, but now the Templars run the city, and just like in Origins, the Templar Order tightly polices mages, often abusing them, creating constant friction in the city.
Now the Templars run it and use it to lock up their mages. Guess not much has changed.
The only way in is for us to work and pay off debts. This is where the game really opens up, or more accurately, where Kirkwall opens up, because, like I said, the entire game takes place in this city and the surrounding mountainside. Now, being confined to Kirkwall is definitely a downside to Dragon Age 2. As I was progressing, I found myself going back and forth through the same districts, fighting the same few bandits and cutthroats over and over.
Another fool!
It can feel a little lacking without a larger region to explore. But in its defense, it leans into that limitation. There are these massive, sprawling side quests that unfold over the course of the entire game, because you keep returning to the same places and seeing the same few faces over time.
Somehow, Hawke, I imagine things won't be dull with you around.
Combat definitely feels more spectacle focused this time around. The animations have really leveled up and everything feels more fluid. As a mage, I was mostly leaning into area of effect spells like Firestorm and Tempest to wipe out groups of enemies, while using crowd control like Cone of Cold and Force Magic to pull enemies around the battlefield. That said, it doesn't feel quite as strategic as before. You can't zoom the camera out in a proper tactical view anymore, and even though I was playing on the same difficulty as the previous game, it felt significantly easier. I was just stomping through hordes of enemies, but it does feel fun.
You're joking.
Something I actually quite like are the new talent trees. As usual, you get a skill point every time you level up, but I really like how these are presented visually with clear branching paths and meaningful build choices.
Well, how about that?
I went for an elemental mage build focusing on primal earth and sky magic with a bit of force magic mixed in, letting me bend the laws of physics and crush and toss enemies around. The skills themselves feel great to use. In Origins there were loads of toggled passive abilities, but they often ended up feeling redundant since you could only have a few active at once. While here there are fewer of those, with more emphasis on impactful abilities and permanent passive bonuses instead. It's fairly fun.
I admit, I'm a little fascinated.
Early on, we bump into Varric, who I mentioned earlier. He wants us to join an expedition in the Deep Roads, where there's lots of money to be made, which we really need to pay off debts that allowed us entry into Kirkwall.
You have a deal.
We end up recruiting a few more characters to join us and help out with this expedition. Aveline is a fellow refugee who lost her husband while escaping the Darkspawn with us. She's a steadfast warrior who eventually joins the Kirkwall City Guard.
I'm here if you need me. Maker knows I could use more satisfying work.
Then there's Isabella. In Origin, she trained you in duelist skills, but here she returns as a fully playable swashbuckling rogue. Anders also returns from the Awakening expansion. At first he felt a bit different, less witty and less playful, but there's a reason for that. He's merged with the spirit of Justice, which has changed his personality. Justice was another companion in Awakening, so it feels like two returning characters in one. Brilliant.
You say that like it's a small thing.
There's also Fenris, a badass elf with a dark and brutal past as a slave. He's been infused with lyrium that enhances his abilities.
Should you find yourself in need of assistance, I would gladly render it.
He sounded familiar. I talk a lot about Final Fantasy on the channel, and I thought I recognised his voice actor. He sounds a lot like Balthier in Final Fantasy XII.
I like it better that way.
Turns out, yes, it's the same brilliant voice actor, Gideon Emery.
Fair enough.
Then there's our sibling, Carver or Bethany, depending on your origin.
Thank you, brother.
Well, Meryl is a Danish elf, gentle, a little awkward, and shunned by her people for her use of blood magic. We actually met Meryl back in Origins, though I didn't realise she was the same character until replaying this, which was a really cool little revelation.
You must be the one the Keeper told me about.
Overall, it's a great cast, but I'm going to rank my personal 3 favourite characters, entirely subjective, just for fun. Number 3 has to go to Anders. He was my favourite character in the Awakening expansion pack, and it's been 15 years since I played Dragon Age 2, so I'd completely forgotten that he was even in this game. Seeing him again was a really great surprise.
Exactly.
He was an absolute lifesaver in my party. I built him as a support mage, so he was constantly dishing out heals and even reviving unconscious party members.
Let's not do that again.
This time he's only at number 3 because he's not quite as witty or entertaining as he was in Awakening, and that's clearly tied to him taking on the spirit of justice. That in itself is a really strong narrative twist, adding a new layer to Anders, but it also pushes him down a much darker path, especially as he becomes increasingly focused on vengeance for mages under Templar control.
This is the justice all mages have awaited.
Number 2, easy Isabella. She comes across as selfish, a pirate who's only out for herself. There's even a moment where Varric warned me she's going to use me, but over the course of the game she grows as a character and is forced to make some difficult choices, ultimately choosing to stick with us when it really matters.
This is your damned influence, Hawke.
She's a badass swashbuckling rogue. What's interesting is she's not just good at stabbing things. I actually built her into the group's main tank through her swashbuckler skill tree. The banter with Isabella was bloody brilliant. She holds nothing back and she's an absolute delight to bring along on quests.
I like big boats, I cannot lie.
Number 1 has got to go to Varric. Like I said, he's my favourite dwarf, period. Look, I'm not a dwarf kind of guy, but Varric is perfect.
Perfect.
He's just so charismatic. He's my main rogue, my ranged damage dealer and picker of locks. He's just the kind of guy you want watching your back. So we go on our expedition with Varric, and his brother tragically gets corrupted by this artifact we find. And it's quite a tragic story with Varric betrayed by his own brother who's lost his mind to this artifact.
I'm here.
Varric, what have I done?
I love how Varric's got this reputation as a storyteller, the teller of tales, and he's even the one telling the tale of Dragon Age 2.
I thought that might interest you.
And he's got his crossbow Bianca, you know there's going to be a story there, and you do get to learn a bit more about Bianca in one of the DLCs that I'll talk about later.
She's a beauty. Isn't that right, sweetheart?
But Varric is my favourite character in Dragon Age 2 because he's charismatic, he's a rogue with plenty of uses, he's central to the story, and he gets some genuinely emotional moments. When I think back on Dragon Age 2, Varric is one of the first characters that comes to mind. He's a pillar of the game. Easy number one.
Well, that's a relief.
Talking a bit more about the game's dialogue, Dragon Age 2 changes things up from the original. Now your character actually speaks for you instead of being a mute protagonist. Problem is that when you pick dialogue options, your character doesn't always say what you expect them to say. A little example here, I picked the option, "Do you miss Wesley?" That's Aveline's dead husband. And what my character actually says is,
It's been a year settling in. Are you alright?
it gets the point across, but "Do you miss Wesley?" felt far more direct and heartfelt. What Hawke says is more vague and doesn't even acknowledge him. It's like this the whole way through the game. It feels like a shift in design philosophy. In Origins, you roleplayed what you want to say. In Dragon Age 2, you're often roleplaying how Hawke would say it.
It appears so.
Overall, it feels like Dragon Age 2 is trying to give Hawke more personality. But in the process, you lose some of the control over the exact words you thought you were choosing. And that's the trade-off. Hawke feels like a more defined character, but sometimes that comes at the cost of player intent.
Bugger it all.
There's also these new dialogue icons that indicate whether an option is nice, sarcastic, or argumentative. Personally, I'd rather not see that information because now I'll just default to the nice option every time. Gotta say, I preferred how Origins handled its dialogue system.
What?
And you know how Varric is the one telling the story of Dragon Age 2? Well, the way I see it, through these dialogue options, I'm not directly choosing Hawke's exact words, but shaping how Varric chooses to tell Hawke's story back to me.
I'm sensing a story here.
Speaking of the story, it's generally broken down into 3 main acts with side quests in between. You get to see all this tension building in the city from the start. The Qunari are stranded in Kirkwall, and there's a constant bitterness between mages and the Templars policing them. Act 1 is all about survival and establishing yourself in the city. You build up your name, recruit companions, and prepare for the expedition into the Deep Roads. Down there, you uncover a cursed artifact that ends up corrupting Varric's brother.
That's putting it mildly.
Act 2 sees Hawke rise in status, becoming a kind of political mediator in Kirkwall. The Qunari presence becomes a major source of chaos as they search for a lost relic of their own.
One day, we shall return.
Act 3 is where everything breaks down. The conflict between mages and Templars erupts into a full civil war in Kirkwall.
Every mage in the circle is to be executed immediately.
You're right at the centre of it as things spiral into blood magic, abominations, and demonic possession. You're forced to pick a side.
Mages must have their freedom.
While I do like Dragon Age 2's story, being broken down into 3 arcs, it can sometimes feel like 3 smaller separate stories with connections between them. It's a shame it doesn't quite develop the same sense of overwhelming escalation as the Blight and the Darkspawn threat in the original game.
A shame.
Meredith was my antagonist, which is tragic in hindsight. She's Knight Commander of the Templars, starts as kind of an ally, but she's eventually driven completely mad. Turns out, she gets her hands on the artifact we found in the Deep Roads. It's a shame because I would have liked to see what she could have been and where the story would have went if she hadn't been corrupted.
If you cannot tell me another way, do not brand me a tyrant.
And there's all these little moments sprinkled throughout, like when Hawke's mother is murdered by a serial killer who takes women's bodies and stitches parts together and uses necromancy to create his ideal bride. This might be one of the most shocking and disturbing moments in all of Dragon Age.
And no force on this earth will part us.
And that's the main story of Dragon Age 2, but there's still a bit more to dig into with the DLC. There's a few story-based DLC, not enough to cover in a whole separate video, so I'm going to run through them and rank them here. My third favourite is Mark of the Assassin. Okay, so through this questline you gain a temporary party member, Tallis, and I've got to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Tallis. If you like her, that's completely fair, but for me, she feels a bit like a celebrity insert with Felicia Day involved. and it doesn't feel quite natural to the world of Dragon Age. She kind of pulls me out the setting whenever she's on screen. Tallis herself also makes a point of saying she doesn't want to kill people.
I didn't want to kill him.
Which comes across a bit strange, given she's spent most of the DLC cutting through enemies without much hesitation, sometimes with a cheeky smile on her face. Even my character calls this out directly without my input.
I've seen you kill several men.
But all that said, there's this pretty cool new area in the countryside and we get to hunt some wyverns. It's literally a breath of fresh air from being restrained to the city of Kirkwall. You attend this fancy party.
Avoid the cheese plate. Terrible.
But secretly we're here to assassinate a duke. There's these 4 stealth segments I wasn't a huge fan of. It'll probably feel a bit more thematic if you're actually playing a rogue instead of a mage, but I will say there were some cool puzzles I quite enjoyed along the way. My second favourite DLC would have to be the Exiled Prince. This one adds a new party member to the core game, Sebastian. You bump into this guy outside the Chantry where he's placed a bounty seeking help to get revenge on the assassins who murdered his family. Sebastian is a straight up badass archer, and he's interesting because he's really devout and religious, but still has this darker side and desire for revenge. And even though he's a DLC character, he fully integrated into the core Dragon Age 2 story, and even had some serious beef with Anders in my playthrough.
He dies, or I am returning to Starkhaven.
His personal questline is also surprisingly solid. You dig deeper into his past and the politics of Starkhaven, and he even brings Liliana into the mix for a bit of action. I always love those callbacks to Origins, it makes the world feel more connected. But my absolute favourite DLC was Legacy. It's a much darker one steeped in Dragon Age lore, the good stuff. You're investigating a Grey Warden prison hidden away from the world. Along the way, you encounter dwarves who have been drinking Darkspawn blood, and you even learn a bit about Bianca's origins, as in Varric's crossbow.
I've still got Bianca. Never misfired a day in her life. You don't want her to see her papa like this, do you?
Your investigation eventually reveals that the prison is directly tied to Hawke's family history. Using his own blood, your father sealed away a powerful Darkspawn entity to save the world. The DLC builds towards an epic boss fight against this new threat, Corypheus.
What manner of speech is this? How long have I slumbered?
He's a Darkspawn that can speak and immediately brings back to mind the Architect from the Awakening expansion, but this guy needs to be put down for good. The whole thing is just sick as hell and exactly the kind of deep Dragon Age lore I really love. Okay, reeling it back in, Dragon Age 2 is a great game that I didn't fully appreciate when it first came out. Being constrained to just the city of Kirkwall and the surrounding mountains is still a weaker element of the game. I like the politics between the Qunari, Templars and Mages, I like the world building, and it leans fairly hard into its characters and sense of agency. I love how the world still feels dark and gritty, and I love the attention to detail with a lot of the returning characters and references. I generally got little buzzes every time something I'd done in Origins was acknowledged here.
Of course.
The whole idea of carrying your save across games is such an awesome feature. It makes it feel like this is your personal story and that your choices actually matter. It brings an element that feels distinctly unique to BioWare games.
Quite an achèvement, I'm sure.
There are trade-offs, of course. Dragon Age 2 definitely breaks out of some of its role-playing roots from Origins. Combat is definitely more fun and more fluid, but in certain ways it's also lost a bit of its strategic edge, and overall it feels a lot easier than the first game. The companions are good, even great. I've come to appreciate a lot of the cast much more this time around. Varric, Isabella and Anders, especially compared to when I first played it.
I'm willing to give a little trust if you are.
I think in general, Dragon Age 2 is much easier to appreciate after replaying Origins and Awakening so recently. I always thought it was good, but coming back to it years later, it finally clicked for me. Maybe that's because Dragon Age 2 isn't trying to tell the biggest story in the series. You're not saving the world from an ancient evil, well, at least not until the DLC. You're not leading armies into battle, you're just trying to build a life in Kirkwall while everything around you slowly falls apart. And that's what makes it special. Dragon Age 2 feels surprisingly personal. By the end, it doesn't feel like you've witnessed a huge chapter in Dragon Age history of apocalyptic scale. It feels like you've lived through Hawke's story. It might not be the biggest game in the series, but it might just be the one that sticks with you the most.
We will always be family. It'll be alright.
Alright, I'll definitely be returning to Dragon Age 3 Inquisition in the future. In the meanwhile, if you haven't already seen my look at Dragon Age Awakening, check that out, or my favourite moment in every Final Fantasy across the series. And you know you want to see the top 10 frogs in Final Fantasy. Have a good one.